faculty and administration of the college, including Dr. Cynthia Pemberton. I'd like to welcome you all to today's event. This event was co-sponsored by LCSC's Native American Club, so thanks to Bob Sabota and Sam White Temple for their help in organizing. Also sponsored by the Division of Humanities, so thanks to our division chair Kyle Ferguson and administrative assistant Leilani Farrell. Leilani, in fact, did the really nice posters that we have for the event as well. And I'd like to just hand things over to Chana Henry to do just a brief introduction or brief welcome on behalf of LCSC alumni. And at that point, we're going to do our video greeting from LCSC alumnus Michael Wasson, who's a Nimipu poet, who's currently living in Japan, of all places. He's a teacher over there, but a poet also who graduated Lewis Clark State College several years ago. Chana and I both knew him when he was a student, and he's now got a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from Oregon State University and is an active publishing poet and getting a lot of attention for that. So we asked him if he would please just give a recorded greeting, since it's 2 o'clock in the morning in Japan where he is. So I'll just hand it over to Chana. If you just give people
just the intro or my story as well?
No, just the intro, okay. just a brief welcome, and then we'll do Michael and then back to you.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me? I just want to thank everyone for coming out. I went through a lot. We all have been through a lot. This MMIW, MMIP movement, it seems like a very national movement. You don't, think that it's here locally, but we're up here to show and tell you guys that and share our stories that this happens to average, normal, everyday women that you know and grow up with. And we hope to put a few faces to some tragic stories. And thank you everyone for showing up and showing respect and being supportive to each and every one of us. This is a lot to take in. It's a lot to share. It's pretty much re-traumatizing, having to think about everything and share it all again. We've all been kind of struggling this past few weeks. I know I have been a lot of sleepless nights trying to figure out how to word things. My name is Chana Henry. I graduated from LCSC with a bachelor's degree in interdisciplinary studies of English and justice studies. And this is Paulette Smith to my right. She is an enrolled Nez Perce tribal member, also a descendant of the Lummi Nation, Tulalip, and Spokane tribes of Washington. The only title she carries are mother, grandmother, and sister. She has 3 children, 2 daughters, and a son, and is an extremely proud grandmother of 4, 3 grandsons, and 1 daughter. She became involved with grassroots efforts during the Megalode protest in 2013, was one of the 28 tribal members arrested, and one of the 3 tribal members who supported the Nez Perce Tribe versus United States Forest Service and Resources Conservation Company International by writing a declaration for that case, in which the tribe successfully won. She then became a member of the Nimipu Protecting the Environment for a brief time, and now does some work behind the scenes, passing on information from those who reach out, using her experience to help guide those in need or advocate on their behalf. She is also a survivor of domestic violence, and for the first time, she'll be sharing her story today. To the right of Paulette is Lucinda Simpson, if now Muput, holds a Master's of Social Work, Eastern Washington University, a Criminal Justice Bachelor degree from LCSC, graduated Idaho Coast Academy, traveled to DC with others to speak on salmon issue, former executive director of Oregon Tribes Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault, served as police officer over 10 years, currently written into a grant tribal traditional plants, serves on Nez Perce Tribe Peacemaker Report, and this spring will be working on Salmon Nation on Salmon Video, and recently spoke on at Salmon Stories Egyptian Theater event in Boise.
All right, so thank you, Chana. And what we're going to do now is do about an 8 or so minute video clip with Michael Wasson, who has recorded his greeting for us. And speaking from Japan. I apologize for my ineptitude with the computer, but we just do what we can do. Okay, we'll restart this once we get the volume figured out. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Michael Watson. I am a tough line with Cove. Iwan nakita tamang tayo kay Iko at Iko Michael. Hello everyone. Good day, I should say. And from here, good evening. My name is Michael Watson. I am a writer, poet, and educator. Currently beaming in, I guess, from Tokyo, Japan. I have been living outside of the States for a little over 7 years now, after I graduated. I want to welcome and give warm-hearted greeting to everyone coming in like myself as a guest to to offer our critical listening, our critical and fully aware and open clarity to the discourse for panelists today. I also wanted to give a special shout out to Professor Chris Norden, who reached out to me to consider me for this occasion. One thing I do really want to emphasize is our urgency in understanding the erasure, the horror, and the effect, the rippling effects we feel in our communities across Native America, the Northwest, Newfoundland, anywhere where our women are not being taken care of and not being listened to. And so I wanted to offer our space some writing that I had done, some of my more recent writing, just to sort of create what is called maybe an invitation to add a tenor, or to add a rhythm or a melody for our discourse today. This is a poem that it is not coming out in my baby book, but it is something that maybe in the future will. So this is for today, for everyone who is struggling with fear, with either the loss or imbalance or volatility of keeping your existence, keeping your life, keeping your presence here where it is needed for everyone around you. Your shadow invents you every time light fails to pass through you. Some days you wake to the sound of smoke pouring through the keyhole in the room. Open your eyes, this is only a test. The bluing of your hands can be anything you want. The bruised dawn like a river rising to your windowsill. A purple, forgetting how blood leaves the body in room. A forsaken lip smeared in thirst, resting on your lip as though your skin could salvage the dream of being so touched. Listen, I know you're afraid. I am too. I know how the body prays for beauty, but remains a shipwreck you are building in my image. How many books are enough to tell you you're alive today? How many days end up all dark and the monsters of your childhood appear like saints erased of their mouths? How the mouth cradles a tongue carved by years in exile until it's ready to shape a word like a parting handful of promised wildflowers. Happy Mother's Day. This is you at the edge of a paradise, growing back after being scorched from the face of earth. This is us, afraid of the men who fail to kiss us goodnight and step through the walls. Someday, you're living a nightmare. Some days, a miracle as wide as a spared life. Listen to me. There will be a day when the world will need you most. Be alive on that day. I vow your father is as American as the bones your mother grew inside you. The gunshot in your head is only a shadow puppet, a slow explosion of a field of cutness in early June's bloom book. Look at the colors like little gods on fire, hurtling in and out of each other's terrified skies. Are you still alone in bed? Is it morning yet where you are? The smoke turns to rain as usual. Listen, my love. This year is just a visitor and next year's ghost. Take care of it because yes, you do deserve flowers for once in your life. You will be the only one left. So hold my hand and call me tomorrow. We are all here. It's okay. It's okay to be this afraid. I am you. Can you feel that? Yes, that is the whole world outside moving without us. But listen to me. Listen. Here's the light, an arm's length away. The ceiling reforming above you like another heaven after its own self-destruction. Here's my body and you, stretching lifelong toward every hole in the house, left as warm as a father running from horizon to horizon. Don't be afraid. touch me here, where someday it hurts. Get up, get dressed, open the door. Thank you. Let's see how it goes. Welcome to everybody here.
And Chana.
Thank you. And thank you, Chris. This means a lot to have me and Michael open this up because we recently lost somebody very close to us on Halloween 2020. All three of us used to hang out together, and pretty emotional hearing that poem. The beginning part, I could hear elements of her in there. So, like I said before, my name is Chana Henry. I graduated LCSC, focused in English and Justice Studies. I worked for the Nez Perce Tribal Police from 2017 until recently, January 2022. You wouldn't know just by looking at me at all the things that I've been through. I haven't told very many people these stories I'm about to share. I told my sister, and my sister tells me that I've lived three lives over. I've been through a lot. In 2009, when I was only 19 years old, I was raped. I was taken advantage of. And when I didn't want to make the report, but my ex-boyfriend, who I was still friends with, actually drove me to the police station and made me do the report. I was uncomfortable. I was mad. I didn't want to say anything, but I ended up doing it. But then I eventually noticed I was treated differently, even when I was making the report to, tribal police officers. I felt like I was treated as a suspect and not a victim. It put me through a lot more trauma because I thought that was supposed to be a safe place to go to. And I felt like nobody believed me. And it's hard for victims to come forward because that's how you're treated. I lost a lot of family and friends. My father ended up disowning me. He said that so another person I thought was there to protect me. My father disowned me and said it was my own fault. Said that I ruined a good man's reputation and that I was probably just making the story up just to get back with my ex-boyfriend. And my ex-boyfriend happened to be standing there, and he went and shook his hand and said, I'm really proud of you for being a man and believing her story. And after that, I never really talked to him until recently, this past year, but that's still never really been acknowledged. I ended up, after losing all my support systems and all my resources, I ended up diving into alcoholism because the first assault happened when I was unconscious. I drank even more. I was pretty hurt and angry. But this ended up leaving me to be victimized and raped 7 more times. But I never came forward with the reports because of how I was treated before and what happened in my previous case. So from the first case, Even though the guy admitted to committing the act, he was, I guess you could say, got to plead out of the case. He wasn't charged with anything. He didn't have to register as a sex offender. He was charged with giving false information to law enforcement, and that was it. And the alcoholism led to domestic violence. You know, I carried all this hurt and anger in my heart. And I'm not claiming to be a saint or anything. You know, I am a victim, but I had a lot of anger and caused a lot of violent relationships. I was manipulated and controlled. I had a fragile state of mind. Abusers can see this. That's how they pick out their prey, their victims. I've been hit in the back of the head and in the scalp to prevent any visual bruising marks. I've been pushed to the ground and punched in the face. So my nose is almost broken. I have a fake tooth up in my top left side. I was threatened with a machete because I ran away and didn't want to go back. I had a huge bruise on my chin and had to lie through my teeth about it to family. But they knew the reason why that bruise was there. I've had my jaw almost unhinged during an argument. He put both of his thumbs in my mouth and literally almost ripped my jaw from my face. I had my hand sprained. I've been stopped 3 times once I did try to leave. And the crazy part about all these stories and all these incidences is they're all from different partners. That they're not from one same guy. And there's been times where I've almost been abducted during the sex trafficking. I thought it was, wasn't local or anything, but there's one time in Spokane, I was almost abducted. I was dragged out of the club I was at with my cousin Bessie and cousin Sky. And I remember being forced into this car, into the back seat, and the doors were locked on me and I couldn't get out. And luckily it was a lighted parking lot. And luckily I had a very good support system and friends who were willing to come look for me. They were screaming and shouting in the parking lot looking for me, shouting my name. And he realized that there were people actually looking for me. And I seen the fear come in his eyes and they kind of widened and he unlocked the door and I scrambled out of the car. And there was another time in Boise, Idaho. I was there with some coworkers in a bar. And I was sober this time, but this big black African-American man came up and grabbed my wrist and he would not let go. I felt like forever. We stood there and I just stared him down and he kept pulling and tugging on me. And right when I was about to start swinging on him, he let go. But it was still scary though, because he let go, but he backed away, maintaining eye contact with me. And I just felt watched. And then there was another time in Kamiah, Idaho, I was abducted from the bar up there, and I was brutally raped and sodomized there. I ended up passing out during that incident. Not until recently I finally came forward with that one because it caused a lot of night terrors. And when I did come forward with that, you know, it happened several years ago. I went to law enforcement and they said, well, why did it take so long? Why are you reporting it now? And I know I should have reported those incidents when they happened, but it's a lot for a victim to admit that this happened to them. For me, I had to admit that I was weak, that I was helpless, that I couldn't do anything, that I was alone, and that every time I tried to fight back, it became worse. The reasons why this MMIP, MMIW movement means so much to me is because I've personally been through all of this. And, you know, I didn't realize how desensitized I came to my own story, because I reported this recent incident to a non-tribal agency. And I was making the report with a straight face, just like an everyday normal conversation. And then not until the sheriff, who I know to be a strong, composed man who never breaks character, I seen him get emotional and upset and angry, and, you know, tears well up in his eyes. And then that's when I finally had that breakthrough cry moment of realizing what happened to me. And it's really sad because, you know, I was hesitant to come forward because of how I was treated by my own tribal police department. And then here I have this non-tribal guy showing me more empathy and compassion than I ever received from my own people. And I've been pretty quiet about what happened to me. I like to think I'm pretty resilient and strong. You know, whatever happens to me, I don't really care. But when I began working with the Mr. Tribal Police Department, I began noticing how common, like freakishly common, this situation is to a lot of women and children and even men sometimes, you know. And part that drew the line for me was when nothing happened when my cousin, BAB, reported her domestic violence and nothing was happened. And then eventually her life was taken when it could have easily been prevented. And then I seen another family member get raped, and the suspect admitted at the scene that he did it and he was sorry. And then I find out later through her father that no charges are pressed because there is not enough evidence. And so I began speaking up about these issues and why cases are being mishandled and not investigated into. And I started experiencing retaliation and targeting and harassment and discrimination. And I was working in a hostile and toxic work environment, even though, you know, law enforcement is already hard enough as it is. I was experiencing worse from the admin side of it, from these supervisors and leaders I was supposed to trust and come to with questions and concerns, and instead I was lashed out at. I appreciate every one of you coming here and willing to sit here and listen. This epidemic of domestic violence, sexual assault, sex trafficking, and stalking issues are way too common, and they need to be addressed in our community and our tribal culture. There's been, from what I can guess, there's like over 30 plus cases in the tribal community that are not going investigated into. And it's just a shame that victims have to go through this and be re-victimized over and over, and sometimes by the same repeat offender. And the sad part of it is I worked with the tribal police department, and it's not the hourly rate, it's not the budgeting, it's not low staffing. It's just having people in there that simply don't care. not willing to take the extra effort to find things out, to ask more questions. And sadly, there's people in there that care more about their titles and abuse of power to influence people and bully people into silence rather than doing the right thing. And I'm here to say no more. No more violence. No more abuse. No more lives lost. Thank you. Now I'll hand it over to Lucinda.
I'm sorry, I have to stand up. I don't sit down when I speak because that's not the way I was brought up. But I would like to say thank you for sharing. And Lennar Yuko was a professor at Duke University. She sat on the board of United Nations Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. And one thing she said to us was, have people tell their story. Have them tell their story. Have them tell their story. Because that's the way they heal, is by getting it out of the system. And I'm glad you're here to listen to this, because you may need to be a shoulder for someone that has been in this predicament before. You may need to share with somebody your story. If you've never shared it before, you need to do it now. What I'm going to talk about is some of the statistics that we have in our Indian country. And this is statistics that I got from Canada Domestic Violence. 4 out of 5 Indian women are affected by violence. 4 out of 5. Indian women violence is 10 times above the national average in America. Homicide is ranked 3rd to those Indian females between 10 and 24 years of age in America. Death is ranked 5 of those aged 25 to 34. We as Indians are ranked number 1 in child poverty, still in America. 40% of Indian children live in poverty. There are 500 MMIW in the urban cities alone. The median age is 29 for MMIW. I was lucky that I did go to Idaho State Post Academy, because there I was given the opportunity to go to other trainings that other officers went to. The tribal police were not afforded that type of opportunity until today. Things have changed a little bit, but slowly. It's taken us a long time to get to where we are now. It's taken a long time. When I worked as a city police officer, I was asked to go out on a rape case with one of my superiors, and it happened at a church in the yard of the church. And the first officer in charge had done a walkthrough of the area, and I went after him. And I noticed a piece of evidence behind a bush. It was a sanitary napkin that he had picked up or gotten as evidence, marked as evidence in this case. Well, after that, they put me on the board of directors for an anti-rape crisis and domestic violence, and I went on other incidences that happened in orchards and different places. You remember the South Hill rapist, Kevin Cove? Kevin Cove was convicted of 24 of the 35 known cases against him, he is now in McNeil Island. But to think of the other women, that their cases weren't strong enough in the courts because there was not enough officers trained to know the difference of what was fact and what was not, what they needed for their case, to make it a strong case for the courts. As a police officer myself, back in the day, we had to pray for domestic violence to become law in America. That was in the 90s. There were times when we'd go out on a call where we'd see someone suffering, whether it be male or female. And you know, male get hurt just as easily as female. So these people are out there. I worked in Oregon for the 9 tribes of Oregon on the sexual assault and domestic violence executive director. And we had our first male shelter because those men there were taught not to hit a woman. And some of them got pretty badly beat up, but they would not touch their woman. This is the way they were brought up. So in Oregon, we had the first men's shelter. As a director of the 9 tribes of Oregon domestic violence and sexual assault, we asked for an FBI agent to attend the affiliated tribes of the Northwest Indians, which is a prominent organization that happens a couple times a year for Indian people in the Pacific Northwest. We asked for FBI agents to come speak and hear our concerns when I worked for Oregon. And one of the concerns that we brought to him was there was an 11-year-old girl that was at Canada. Her mother was working and the grandmother was in charge of her, and somehow she slipped through the cracks. She was waiting in the lobby with the fireplace. This male from Renton came along and took that child who was 11. He took her out and raped her. And she was badly hurt. And the grandmother and mother got her in there, and the guy was not charged. There was no charge that we could bring against him because Canada is on the Indian reservation. He was from Renton, Washington. He had an attorney already. And his attorney said, you guys can't do anything because they can't arrest him because he's not native. So he got away with raping this 11-year-old child. And that was my testimony to that FBI agent. We got problems here in Indian country, in America. One of the cases that we had in Oregon, there was a female who was an Indian on a reservation. She had been married to an airline pilot of a prominent airline. And they divorced, so it was her ex-husband. He would go and do things to her. And he would take a flight to New York or Dallas or someplace. And he'd say, I never did anything. I wasn't even there. I'm over here. I'm answering my cell phone. I'm in New York right now. We had a hard time doing anything about that. But they listened to our concerns. They brought an Indian FBI agent, and he listened to us. So we made a little bit more ground. We covered a little more ground. Well, I know some of the laws are tough because I work both in tribal and non-tribal. And when I was working in Orofino, one of the examples I could give you is there was a guy who was writing his own prescriptions. he stole script from the doctor's office. He took that and he was writing himself some Oxycontin. And he knew my work schedule. He knew where I'd be different times, you know, in the city. And I couldn't catch him because there was no way I could handle it because he was on the reservation. I was a city police officer. I had no jurisdiction. In order to even go on the reservation, I was called as backup by the Bureau of Indian Affairs at that time. They said, we need backup. Can you come help us out? That's the only time I could go on the reservation as a non-tribal police officer. And that was tough. That's one of the things that we had problems with. But years ago, the first person that we had law and order for on the reservation or with on a reservation was an Indian. He was a U.S. Marshal, and he was the first law enforcement on the whole reservation. He was an American Indian. His name was Alex Pinkham, Sr. And the state didn't like that. They didn't like an Indian enforcing the laws. He knew everybody. He knew all the tribal families. He knew all the non-Indian settlers and things. But they didn't like it because they didn't like him having control of that area. They didn't like it. It was a threat to them. We don't need this Indian, you know, out there being the U.S. Marshal. So they stopped that. They stopped that system. There's a lot of gaps that I see in the system, but for one thing, when I worked as a city police officer, we had access to different information on the database that the tribal police didn't have access to. And when I was Orofino City Police Officer, the chief of police, we kept statistics and give them to the Office of Justice. So they had our data about our crime. But for the tribal, they didn't keep the statistics of what happened in Indian country. So there was a big gap there. And there still is, but there's a lot of things going on right now. For instance, the NCIC, the National Crime Information, they have reported 116 MMIW. And when we look at the tribal data, it says 5,712. A little bit skewed there, a little bit different. But when they did the transition from Bureau of Indian Affairs, I worked on that 638 myself for the Nez Perce tribe in making the transition from Bureau of Indian Affairs to tribal. And sometimes I think I made a mistake working on that. And the first person they hired, I thought was a good person. He was here for 10 years. But of course, somebody's always going to find something wrong with somebody. But he and I went to the police academy together in Boise. And we shared vitamins at the police academy. And I really got to know him and like him. He was raised in Puerto Rico. He spent 25 years in the military. He had top security, but yet we didn't hang on to him in the Indian country. He started doing good things for our tribe. One of the things that he did was I got called, I guess the other officers weren't sure how to handle the situation because there was a female there was a person that was being harassed on the telephone. And so I guess, I don't know if it was the guy that didn't know what to do with the situation or what happened, but I got the case to work. And what it was is that there's some communication systems. You have to go to the federal communication. You had to go to the federal communication systems with harassment and other things. This person was calling her and harassing her from Los Angeles. And she was one of those that had to answer the phone all the time. And she was just annoying and she couldn't talk when she needed to talk to the general population. But anyway, I turned it over to the FCC at that time. Now it's the Federal Trade Commission that you report those to. But at that time, I wrote down all the pertinent information and I turned in my case and they took it. And the lady that harassed her was charged federally for harassment on the telephone. We have a lot of changes that go back quite a ways. Like I said, in 1990s, we had the domestic violence. In 2017, there was a lady by the name of Brook Cruz who abducted an Indian woman that was close to having her baby. Her boyfriend lived in the apartment upstairs from them. They wanted a baby. They took that Indian woman and they knocked her out. And they cut the baby out of her stomach. They took the baby out of her stomach. And she came to as they were cutting. They knocked her out again. So today, that's why we have Savannah's act. And Biden's the one that put that through. And it's to make changes in law enforcement so that we can move forward here. So we can do the things that people can do, the things that they need to do. That lady got 20 years in prison for taking that baby, and Savannah was dumped on the Red River, and her body was found 8 days later. And they kept the baby. They had possession of her Indian baby. It was prosecuted in county court because it was off the reservation that this apartment sat. But thanks to Savannah, we have some changes that are made because of her. Changes that we needed to happen. So the act that they had was called Savannah's Act, and it's Bill S-227, and that was done in 2020. I'll have to back up one because in 2019, there was a survey discussion that went on with tribal and non-tribal in Boise and different places. And what they tried to do is identify issues that there were in the gaps with Indian and non-Indian. One was interagency collaboration. Another was community safety system change. Another was to identify or define what is missing and establish and sustain, have a sustainable communication. Sometimes I think that's still lacking, but we do the best that we can in this country here. In 2021, Deb Haaland, as the U.S. Secretary of Interior, her main focus was to start the MMIW cases and try to find ways to get those solved. I was able to meet Deb Haaland when I went to Washington, D.C., and she's a person that's well liked on Capitol Hill and in the Indian country. Very good at what she does. But the tribal needs that were identified is to identify if missing or left on own accord, if missing by force or violence, an independent response to the disappearance, law enforcement contact by phone or in person, to track events, dates, and times, to journal the information, document phone calls, track events, or developments in the case. To date, there are more grants out there for domestic violence and sexual assault, thanks to these changes. And that's why we're here, because one of those grants were given out close to Indian country, or this was Indian country, but now, how it goes. But there's a lot out there on the Nez Perce Reservation. There's a lot of grants that were given to the tribe to work on issues. And there's a poster down there that we have where there's going to be another MMIW and it'll be up in Coeur d'Alene. And I think you could still register for it, but we have this copy. This is our only copy that we have. It's a 3-day thing up Coeur d'Alene, the 4th, 5th, and 6th of May. And it has a web page on there to contact if you want to go to that training and find out more about it. The survey discussion that the tribal and non-tribal had was that they need to train and give technical assistance to tribes, which they're trying to do. A strategy to make public aware, which we're trying to do outreach to tribal and establish appropriate guidelines, report data of MMIW, and to provide grants and funding sources, which they're trying to do. I have some slips of paper up here that has important numbers on them of the different Indian organizations. Kanagluska, RAIN, Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, MMIW USA, and it has their phone number, and Domestic Violence Prevention for Mending the Hoop. And all of them help with different areas. So if you'd like to have one of those, feel free to take one. And now there's been some changes in the law realm too, is they have an organization, Office of Justice has NAMUS, and that tries to help identify people that aren't identified. Just in LA, Orange County alone, there's 100 deaths a day. And some of those are unidentified. And in some places they have morgues that are so filled up, I mean, these facilities that are so filled up with unidentified people that they have to have reefers in the parking lot for some of the bodies that are not identified. It's hard to identify people. You've got to go into a lot of things in order to find out who this person is. Especially the way we are today, we can hop on a plane and we could spend a day in Seattle, or we can, go someplace else, Boise or whatever for the day. And people are so mobile, and that causes things too as well. But for lastly, I think my time is up. All Native women missing or murdered, these are justice. Their lives have importance, a purpose, and a meaning and definition. Media must not discriminate and no longer prioritize on white privilege, attitude, and social benefit values over the Native women. This is still ongoing to date with that case with Gabby Petito. That was widely publicized, but she comes from affluent New York, Long Island area. So, that's what happens. But if you're a little lady that lives on a reservation, you're a statistic. You don't get that publicized the way it should be with our missing people. So with that, Chris. Thank you.
I'm Paulette Smith, and today I will have a few slides so we get that pulled up. But as Chana touched on earlier, preparing for this is hard. Sharing your story is it's raw and it's so personable. And when you've lived that and you have allowed somebody to rip you down and break you, someone that said that they loved you, that they would never hurt you, it does something to you. And only a woman that has been through it can understand it. I have often heard it, even when I was a young woman, and I witnessed this go with my grandmother and my aunties, and I would be so angry, and I'd be, why don't they leave? I would never let a man do that to me. But lo and behold, I did for 11 and a half years. I met my kids' father when I was 16 years old. I wanted to do the slides first, but I think I'm just going to go into this, and I'm going to have them just go through the slides. And you can just read what I have on those. I argued with myself for the last few days in particular about how I was going to present this, because 11 and a half years is a long time. 11 and a half years, you're thinking out there, my God, lady, why didn't you pick yourself up? Why didn't you leave waste in them? Well, because they don't come off to come at you with cheer brutality. They don't, start punching you at the beginning. They're very charming. They're very nice. And we were both very, very young. The difference between the two of us is that he was so far advanced than me. He had so many more experiences, not good ones, negative ones, dysfunctional ones that came out of alcoholism and drug abuse. My experiences after I've actually gone and done my healing and gone back and looked at why did I do these things? I was sheltered. For a Native young woman, I was very sheltered. I was very lucky that my grandmother took care of me at the most crucial times in my life when I was very little and in my high school years. Because she instilled in me that you don't have sexual relations unless you're with somebody you love. And those people love you dearly and will protect you. That's what I thought. That's not what I experienced. I allowed for this guy to tear me down mentally first. That's how it started with me. My words were too big, and I thought I was better than he was, and everybody around him, and they just started picking at all of that, picking at it. And I was ugly, and I was mean, and nobody would love me. I heard it all. He was also very, very possessive. I moved to Lapway 30 plus years ago. I never grew up on a reservation. I either lived in Lewiston, I graduated here, or I lived in Bellingham, Washington. The only reservation I lived on was Playlift Reservation. But I was also very sheltered there because my dad was very protective. And so I was at a disadvantage when I moved to Lapway. I didn't know those people. They didn't know me. And I have to be really honest, I wasn't very welcomed either. It took me a long time to claw my way into where I'm at now, and I literally clawed my way because I am needed. I belong there just as much as anybody else. And I love those people just as much as the rest of them do. And that's why I'm doing this work. Because I'm hoping that one of you out there, here's what I have to say today. It'll save you from 11 and a half years of torturing yourself. Of course, the abuse escalated. Pretty soon, I was being slapped, my hair was being pulled. And then one night, he just totally went for it. So I'm not going to file so many times that my coworkers had to come and take me into the hospital and have CTs done in the whole 9 yards. I think at that point is when I started to spiral to my lowest. I had my daughter with me at that point in time because when he and I first got together, we were off and on, and I got pregnant with my daughter. I was trying to go to school and I was trying to go to work, and unfortunately at that time period, we didn't have all the programs where they helped you with childcare and rent and all that good stuff, and I am so glad that they do that for you now, young ladies. Take advantage of that. I had to choose. All I ever wanted in life was to how my children would be happy and have family. But I didn't have that growing up. I was bounced from place to place. They went to my grandmother's, they went to aunties, and a lot of times I kind of just grew up on my own. I had surrogate moms that I looked up to a lot. One sitting here. And so, in saying that, when I spiraled, I was alone. He had managed to isolate me because those are the steps. You know, they isolate you, they stalk you. The stalking I thought was cute at first. You know, he would come to my house at 3 a.m, throw rocks at the door, and my grandmother would be so angry, or he'd be calling me out all hours of the night. But I was so naive and young, and I realized this was not normal. This is not healthy. This is very dysfunctional. So anyway, moving my daughter down into Lapway and going to work and just wanting to be happy, wanting to be successful. And after that very brutal incident, spiraling and so on and so forth, of course, all of the mental stuff into, and it got worse, and it got. I'm not going to repeat everything because that's not where I am. But I got to a point where I was at my lowest. And this is where you need to understand as somebody that could help, that could be witnessing this. When you're beat down like that mentally, you're depressed and you're spiraling. I was the girl that, when I went to high school, I might have had one pair of jeans. I never had a pair of sweats because I didn't dress like that. I dressed nice. When I moved to Lapway, that all changed because he didn't want me talking to anybody. He didn't want me even looking at anybody. I couldn't go to the store with him or go to the Piney Lot for basketball, anything. Because then I would be looking or talking to somebody that I shouldn't be. I was kids playing around. I knew nobody. I was so isolated. And his family and friends believed everything that he said. What I said was nothing. Didn't matter. So anyway, after going through this for years, I get to my lowest and I decide, you know, maybe he's right. Maybe my daughter would be better off without me. Maybe, you know, this is just it for me. And so I swallowed a bunch of pills. That was the lowest point in my life, and I'm so ashamed of that. The other thing we don't know about these women is that we carry a lot of guilt, we carry a lot of shame. You were enough. You have to own it. Native countries, our women get abused, and I don't understand that because we are the backbone of our tribes. We are the driving forces. We are the ones that lift our men up and shove them forward. We're the ones. You see any men up there? No. And any man that comes up here and does this kind of work, and I hope that you do. So I got committed to the fifth floor for a few days. Me, I was studying psychology. I was to get out of there. And as soon as my head got a little bit clear, I did. Because I need to get my head straight. And you would have thought then that I would have, you know, picked myself up and moved. But no, you know, like I said, they're charming. They take one thing you want here, and you will do it repeatedly, and then the next up and snap it down. That's the cycle. They say it takes a woman that's being abused 7 times to actually leave it. 7 times. I did try to leave. I even went to a shelter home, and he still came there, throwing rocks and yelling, calling the number. I would go out to restaurants and such when we first got together. And like I said, I thought it was great. You know, if you recall, the restaurant number, where you at, who you with, when you could be home. You know, and after it's all said and done with, as far as me being at St. Joe's, and I went home, I had 2 more children with him. And I went through a lot of stuff in between that. But the final, ultimate thing for me was when I was pregnant with our son. And he decided he was going to cheat with me with the lady right next door. A woman that was old enough to be our mom. That was the final for me. I couldn't take that anymore because he had cheated many times. To the point where when I lived with him at his mother's house, they would come pick him up and drop him off. But I couldn't leave. I couldn't talk to nobody. And I would ask him time and time again, if you don't want me, why do you keep me here? Why am I here? Power thing. It's a way to hold somebody down. I was humiliated during that relationship so many times. And I didn't trust anybody. I still don't trust most people. I have a very small circle because I don't allow people into my world. I have a great distrust for females. You would think it would be men. I don't trust females. Because when I was going through all of my stuff, many were sleeping with him. Many knew about it. Nobody was warm enough to talk to me about it. Somewhere along the line, I crossed over the threshold, let's bud out. Just like Chana said, when you get abused like this, and you're abused for years. I wasn't as brutally abused, but I took it for years and years and years because I was gonna fix it. I could fix it. I could make him better. Nobody can make somebody else that better, you know. And it took me many years to figure that out. It took me many years to tell myself I wasn't a failure. That was his deal, not mine. I grew up with my grandparents telling me, especially my grandfather, telling me I could do anything, I could achieve anything I wanted. So when I was going through all of this, my grandfather was gone by this point in time. All I felt was failure. I felt alone, and I felt like I had failed myself. But at a certain point in time, I turned to my mom, and I know that's a weird thing to say, but my mom, she was tough. She lived on the street. She went through her own dysfunction. She was an alcoholic. And mom, love them and leave them. That was what I turned into. I decided not to waste my time. I decided that men were just there for me to play with. I had to get myself out of that cycle. It has taken me many years because I went through so much with this man that I thought really truly loved me, that we were going to make a life together, and all of it was a lie. All of it. He had many children. And you think the neighbor next door was the ultimate blow. Last year, we, myself and my girls, had given him the credit of at least he didn't have children between us, Mom. At least, you know, he didn't have any babies while we were together. No, actually he did. I just didn't know about it until last year. I had a child between my 2 girls or somebody else. But he kept saying good secrets. I'll tell you that. I'll do that. So this man, he has his own trauma. You know, I'll give him that. But he put me through so much. And I think he thought he would break me ultimately forever. But that's not how I was raised. I am not a woman that's going to lay down or take anything from anybody anymore. I came out on the other side much stronger. I see things with crystal clear glasses these days. And I would like for the MMIW movement and all these laws to be changed, because I know within some of these slides that I presented, there is complacency within our tribal PD and other tribal or any other PDs, because there's jurisdictional issues. There are just so many things that come into play. I would call the cops. I called the cops. I used to sit there, and they would pick him up and take him to the other side of Blackway. And if you see Blackway, it's not very big, right? 15 minutes, he was back at my door. And let me tell you a little bit more. Is when he would come home and terrorize me, it wasn't for 5, 15 minutes, hours. When I was thinking about all the things that I went through this last month, 26 years ago. 26 years ago, I managed to heal myself and become so much stronger. And I had forgotten, I can't believe, I had forgotten some of the things I had gone through, because when I was living my health, I never thought I would. I never thought I would get past the insomnia, the anxiety. And I had a bad 3 hours a night sleep was good for me for many years. Think about that with abused women. 3 hours of sleep, you're feeling like you're going crazy. And I honestly really did. I felt like I was losing my mind, and I was trying to take care of my children. I was trying to work and pay bills, and I was working for the tribe 24/7 with less than $6 an hour. Not a living wage. Do you think I could escape with that? Do you think I could cut away 5 cents and just start saving and run? No. No, I was stuck. I was stuck for the longest time. I finally managed to start healing myself to the point I had lost my mother, I lost my grandmother. I spiraled for many years, and I did my own self-destruction. And every time I would attract these men that were so dysfunctional. Why? Because I'm a people helper. Those are the people that oh, you need help, let me help you. I got with one man that was even worse than him. I almost thought I was going to end up dead in there in Montana. And sadly, the men that I've had to deal with on the traumatic end have been on all. So, the base for me was worked out. My mind started clearing up. And I decided the things that were important to me. I'm going to show you these slides here. That was me. My senior year at high school. I missed her, but she's not me. That's not me anymore. That little picture, I was resting here in Megalith. I found a time where I was empowered even more, and I knew that I was on the right track. I knew that. I have a purpose. I had a purpose all along, but I wasted a lot of time because of all the things that I put myself through. There's another thing that I want to point out. Yes, your abusers put you through a lot, and yeah, there's many reasons why you stay. But when you start healing, you need to take in the part that you also allow things to be done to you, and get your strength back to never allow that again. And that's where I'm at. I started writing out and tries to have any feelings for me because I'm just not there. That last picture is me now. I have 3 beautiful children that are very driven, and they're very capable of taking care of themselves. And that's what I wanted in the beginning. That's all I wanted was for my children in a happy home. I didn't want fancy cars and big houses. All I wanted was a kid that was down to the ground from different families, and a home that I actually took care of, that I could be proud of, and I am. I also have 4 grandchildren, 3 grandsons. daughter, she cosmetology school at Northwest Indian College. She's the one with all my grandkids. My oldest grandson, he is fifth grader, but he is doing math and reading at an eighth grade level. I've reached my goals of happiness. You can do that. Yes, you can go to the depths of hell, but you can come right back if you work on it. If you work on you, and that is the key factor. You have to work on you. The men in our society that do this type of thing, it's not just men either. It is women too. It's because they're drowning in their own issues, drugs, alcohol, depression, trauma, and that's from time immemorial. And getting our people to understand that they've got to work on themselves and become mentally healthy has been really hard. But we're starting to see the movement. It can be done, but we need to get more people involved. Right now, you know, I'm on different groups and I do different things for the tribe. I'm part of the resolution committee and a part of another group that we don't have a name for. And we look at the issues and the problematic departments within our tribe, and we have to lead issues out there. We have to get our tribal PD to understand that our people need to have the correct services met. When we call them and there's a child abuse case, there's domestic violence issue, something needs to be done, and not just what's under the carpet. And it's just a lot of complacency. This was my first time sharing this, and like I said, I argued with myself over the last month because of the things that I remembered, and they were not things that I necessarily shared with my children. My oldest is sitting right here. And even though I'm proud of where I landed and how I am now, a lot of the things that I did was embarrassing for me. And I hold that guilt. But I've always, especially my oldest, because she was my best friend, I tell her everything, but there's still things from that time period I don't feel that she needs to be burdened with unless the time presents itself where she starts to go into that area, then I'll figure things out. But what I would like to leave you with is that you can be involved. There are calls to action. And I have those listed in the slides. I also have materials up here if you are interested in getting involved with those things. Because we are small in numbers all across the country. Our Indigenous women are very important. They are very vital to keep our tribes alive. And the biggest thing is getting our people to be healthy, getting them off the drugs, the alcohol. And the reason a lot of them are on those things is because the trauma and the brutality that they've lived all their lives. And they go right back into it because where else are they going to go? I've watched time and time again these young people come back to the Nez reservation, and we have a lack of housing, we have a lack of jobs, and it's depressing. Why do you think they drink? Why do you think they drug? Everything happens for a reason. Everything is a domino effect. We need to shift those dominoes back into more positive realms. We need to get our kids, our youth, our young adults involved in calls for action. We need to get them involved with programs that teach our language, our culture, how to treat each other, how to be respectful. And I apologize if I'm rambling because, like I said, this is my first time at this, and man, I had so many emotions going through. I lost so much sleep in the last few days. please, if you witness that, if you have a loved one, don't just ignore it. My cry for help is when I swallowed the pill. I needed somebody to make me up. To look, shove me back in the other direction. 11.5 years would take way too long for what I did. Thank you.
We have another speaker. Her name is Renee Holt.
Hello.
Ricky.
I guess it's still Todd's May week. First off, thank you. Thank you to Chana, your story, and for Lucinda to share her work, and to Paulette. You know, I think their stories are, it's something else to hear firsthand what somebody goes through. And then to think about, you know, the stages of healing and grief that it takes to get to where they're at before they can even tell their story. And so I'm processing what I've heard, you know, in this short time, because up to this point I had not heard their personal stories. And so if you would just excuse my processing right now is thinking through, and to just really send an acknowledgement and to inform and share, to validate you both for what you've endured. And there's no pretty way, no kind, or no no positive way to go through it without first accepting and finding forgiveness, and you know, also led by love. And right now I'm just you know, feel like it took in a lot. I myself am going through, you know, just family things. I'm a mom. Before I go any further, I just wanted to acknowledge them, and then introduce myself. My name is Chana Henry. I am a mom to 3. My Indian name, I am Danette and also Ninipu. And I'm an independent scholar who works in this particular area as a former Native American Women's Association counselor, friend, advocate at WSU. I had students who dealt with date rape, and on campus, you know, on university campuses, young people, you know, it's not uncommon to hear about date rape. And so that's where my area of interest began, in how to help not only these young women, but also really looking back on what's happening within our Indian communities. So I thank Chris for, you know, helping set this up, and also the LCSC Native American students for showing up and being here, and all of you for listening in. I wanted to bring in, you know, as a scholar, I have mentors and people that I look to, and people who work with me and also guide me and give me the readings to do the work. And I'll share that a little bit here with our students, because I'd like you all to take with you something from this as you heard these stories, and as you develop and grow on your educational journey. I think it's important that you read Native scholars who are tackling these issues, but also who are doing the work with the communities that are affected. And Indian country itself is vast. I mean, there's over 560 tribes. There's new ones that have come in recently. And each community has a different form of jurisdiction that they follow when it comes to local municipalities, and being a border town like Lewiston. It is within the Nez Perce. The border actually is like by Otway over by the casino, yet we come into this every day. We have people who live here and live here. And yet we're erased every day too. And so when these women talk about the jurisdictional pieces, I thought I'd like to read a little bit so you can gain an idea about what it is to be a Native and to live within, I guess, within a society that erases us. And for our non-Native people here, if you can understand how long we've been dealing with this, and dealing sounds so oversimplified. It's like, just deal with it. We've endured, we've survived, and we're thriving. We are beyond the historical relics of being Native people, Indigenous. I myself, I have a mentor who reminds me often to tell the story beyond survivance. We're more than survivors. We are vibrant people. We have our culture still. We have our languages. We still have ceremonies. We still have practices that can be used. And I think one of the couple slides before this that Paulette had shared does a good job of bringing that in. And I want to just bring it all together for us here, because like I said, we're in the 21st century. And for me personally, I've endured and seen a lot too, with my own mother. I really, what Paulette shared, the part about your mother, resonating with her mother. I've been thinking about how our mothers influence us as Indian women, and being raised or being born and raised into a matriarchal society. I was fortunate to have my, what we call Ke, and in Nez Perce it's called Himyuma. I challenge you, young Mimipu, to ask your language instructor, what is Himyuma? Actually, we have Harold here. He can probably break it down later. Putting the Soyapo guy on the spot here. He's our ally because he helps us. But Ke and Himyuma is a fancy, in the Soyapo words, a fancy thing for kinship. And when we have kinship systems intact, that's a part of our cultural identity that helps us with resilience. Someone mentioned resilience earlier, what it means to be a survivor and how to grow and move beyond that. I want to be able to tell that story for our young people so that they can see there's another side to this story, and it begins with them moving forward and showing that there's more to who we are as Indian people. And so I'd like to read something. This is from Sarah Deer. She's one of my favorite scholars. In fact, I learned about her when I was at WSU for the NAWA, the Native American Women's Association. The ladies, they met every week. Between myself and my colleague, we would split. She'd go one Wednesday, I'd go the following Wednesday, so we could balance out. And listening to the stories, I had one gal who is now, believe it or not, one of the directors of the Indigenous, I think it's called the Indigenous Women's Resource Network. They're based out of Montana. Her name is Anita Lucchese. She was one of my students, and she brought in Sarah Deer. And what shocked me at first when she brought the book in, just kind of telling of the generational differences when a young person comes in and they bring you literature that seems so loud with could be just at first I thought it was vulgar, like, oh my God, but that's the generational difference. But to a young person, it's a reality. And she shared her story, and I don't have the authority to tell her story right now, but I'm just sharing. She introduced this book to me, and I want to share it with you all, and to you young ladies and gentlemen out there who are here. Thank you to the men who are here. The book is called The Beginning and End of Rape by Sarah Deer. How many of you have heard of that? 1, 2. Okay, I need more people. This is my teacher mode right now. I'm going to need more of you to have to raise your hands here next time. Maybe by next year's Native American Awareness Week. But I'm going to read this excerpt for you so you can get an idea how long, when that dealing with colonization we've been enduring for too long. And this being the way we understand. She says, if we are to make true progress towards safe societies, the core experiences and realities of Native women must be central to the global movement to end rape. Rape is a political issue with settler colonial foundations, and an honest analysis of rape in America requires telling some difficult truths, including the fact that the U.S. government has cultivated the epidemic it now seeks to remedy. Any honest anti-rape movement must wrestle with the dark truths of colonial violence. Because the movement will remain stagnant unless we can centralize the context in which Native women experience rape, we must enlarge the mainstream dialogue about rape to include the issues of tribal sovereignty and self-determination, not only because of the high rate of rape perpetuated against Native women, but also because the very system on which the U.S. bases its claim to this land is shrouded in the trauma of rape. Avoiding the truth is what will keep us from true reform. Thus, we must explore both the beginning of rape as well as the end of rape as experienced by Native women. That alone tells us, here in this, whether it's in this room or the community or family or here, that there's a lot of work to be done still. There's unsaid words and even unsaid action, as Chana shared. There's an individual out there who's been running without, out in the community, never been charged, or has been charged and received a slap on the hand. That is truly shocking to me. And that's why I began with, I'm still processing what this is, because that means there's a dangerous person still out there. And I have children. I have, my oldest is 26, and my middle one's going to be 21 on Sunday. Then I have a 13-year-old. 2 boys, and my oldest identifies as they, them, and I'm learning a lot from my kids. And they tell me about these things. They talk to me, and they educate me. I'm really, sometimes I'm from that old school, and I'm kind of embarrassed at times when they school me on things, but I also welcome it because our society is changing, and it demands us to also adjust. And the old things that worked, some of them need to go, but some of them can stay. And a lot of that is based on values and principles that are Indigenous led. So the cultural aspects of healing and how we recover, and also how we continue to move forward and to help someone else. That empowerment circle, that cycle, that interruption, it demands a different process, a different adjudication, if you will. It has to be revamped entirely. And believe it or not, it involves having compassion, being kind, being loving, and also supporting people, but you also must believe your victims. When someone comes forward and says, this has happened to me, you must believe them. It hurt me to hear that we had tribal officers not believe her, and to know that it was a non-native that actually had more compassion for her. I didn't like hearing that because I know some of these tribal officers, and I would hope that they would be compassionate, loving, supporting, and believe when a victim comes forward, should that victim might be one of my children or one of my nieces or nephews. God forbid that it's anybody that we know. If an officer does that, are they truly an officer? Are they truly somebody to uphold the law? And who determined that, right? How did that come to be? And Sarah Deer talks about that and how the judicial system has failed Indian people for the last 500 years. Not just the last 200, the establishment of this stolen country, but from when they set on the land that they now call this country. It's laden, there's a litany of issues and things, and here we hear the story of these two women here. And it's going to take me some time to think about this a little bit more. Again, I just heard the stories this morning, and along with you, and a lot of the violence that we witness and see out there. I myself, I worked in Native teacher education when I worked at the WSU, and I currently work with the Northwest Indian College. And as an independent scholar, I can look back and see systems differently, and owning that and learning. I'm currently working on a publication and writing on how and what the system could have used to help our teachers. And a lot of the support that we don't receive is systemic. And when you start looking at and deconstructing systemic oppression, you begin to see where the positions of authority and power come in. And a lot of that is top down. And that's pretty much how the judicial system has been for Indian people too. We're at the very bottom rung. We don't get to see who makes these decisions. We might every now and then, I'm a former board member for the NIA, and I remember going in every February for the legislative summit. And we'd meet all these legislators, and they were getting ready to go into they just got out of their debates or whatever it is that they do behind the doors, and then they go forth and say, we're going to work with the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, we're going to do this, all these great things. And I learned from that, I'm like, wow, this is what they do every year, and how many of our issues never get heard. And so when Lucinda brought up Savannah's Act, and also looking at how many communities across Indian country deal with MMIP, MMIW, and even we have a high number, believe it or not. I'll insert this slip, and I think there was something on here too that Paulette shared, but here in Idaho, we actually have more missing men, more missing Indigenous men than we do women. You got to think about that. What does that tell you? We have someone saying that she wasn't heard. So if there's some discrepancies on that, those statistics and the data that the State Department of HHS carries for us, where's these numbers coming from that they're finding more Indigenous men? The names of missing murdered Indigenous men, people, and it's disturbing. It's a bit disturbing, it really is, because we have women being violated and children being assaulted. Thank you for mentioning the predators. There are predators among us, and they look to see who doesn't have an intact family, who is alone. And I sit on the board of directors for our Tribal Boys and Girls Club, and one thing that I really worried about that I brought to the table each time, and I made sure they understood, when we were in the pandemic, when those kids were home, who was with them? That only hurts because we learned that there are children who got hurt during the pandemic. It's a bit emotional only because when it's under your watch, you want to know, how could we have helped? What could we have done? And I don't think that's like it emotional, but I am. This is a very serious thing. But I'm just saying, when it came to reading those statistics in our tribal Indian child welfare person, when they shared the statistics and the data with us, and at the time I was also working as a grant writer, so we had to read through some of these data and the stats. It was disturbing. It's disturbing to know that these are happening in our tribal community. My tribal community, I'm in Perce tribal, us tribal members here. This is a reality. And so these issues that we're talking about, they stem from a lot of traumatic, unhealed pain in individuals who are needing serious help. And how do we help people if they don't want the help and don't think that they're a problem, but they really are? It's deeply layered. It's not something that just goes away. It takes, time. Again, going back to those values and principles, but we want to make sure that our children are safe, and to hear the story of someone who was a child when it began and to be an adult. Those types of things get to me, right? And why I think I was such a helicopter mom for my children. I never let my kids go see our family unless I was there. We went to family barbecues together and we left together. And whenever I entrusted my kids with family, sometimes things happened. And there were alcohol related activities. And I'm staunchly against that because of what I know can happen. It happens to family. And it really gets to the core of you when you become a parent. You want what's best for your child. And that's exactly what Paulette was saying. I don't know how I did it, what I was doing, but I did it. And I think a lot of this that comes forward in really looking for allies, people who want to help, educate your relatives, your family, your friends, people you're connected with. We have the most significant and I think largest resource in our hands right here when we pick up our phone. Google is free. You can type in the name of an author. You can type in the word Native American and rape. Hit send and it'll pull up all articles, newspapers. You can even go to Google Scholar and read up who are the scholars that are writing about this issue. We don't have room anymore to say, I don't know. We don't. We live in a new regime, new society. We really do. The pandemic stopped everything, and it showed. When it stopped, everything slid forward, and we dealt with things. Unresolved grief, trauma, childhood, abandonment, all kinds of things we learned. And as a tribal community, our Indian Child Welfare Office, they did some research, and I've lived ostrich syndrome at times. I buried my head. And to read those things, I realized I've been privileged. I lived away from the res, and it's easy to move away and not hear what goes on. When you move back home and you hear stuff and you see it, and then you meet people, it's not the same. And so When you think about what does it take, and Sarah Deer shares, the only way that we can end this is to begin talking about it, and we can no longer hide it. And I look to the young people. I think our time, for me, I'm a Gen X. I think my time's done in doing what I need to do. I've lived my life of activism. I've been out, I've done all that stuff. Now it's time for the young people. It's time for us to hold the door open. It's our job to step back. And it's now your job to begin, because you have the energy. You may not have the time, but you have energy. We've put in our work. We've even sacrificed, and some of us are still unhealed. We're still going through it. We're still living with it. Now it's time for the young people to come forward. That's how I believe. That's how I'm being mentored, and that's what I'm working towards. So when I say you have a free resource right here, you don't need to have a library card sometimes. You can freaking download audiobooks, you know? I have a kid who tells me he can't read at school, he can't do stuff, so I have to download things for him. Guess what? He'll be like, hey, I read a book, because he listened to an audiobook. He's a spatial learner. I had to learn about that. I had to learn traditional way. Oh, read a book and sit there and write a book report. Those don't work no more. Times have changed, and so should we. Our values can stay the same. Our values should protect women and children, and keeping everybody, in that space. Our elder here just gave me the signal. She's our catalyst. I just want to close real quickly by saying thank you. I mention and speak to the young folks. I do believe that the younger people are the ones to do the work now. It's true. And there's many of us who could help you, but remembering your language, remembering your culture, and also thinking about the community and the lands that you come from. That's where your power is going to be found, and that's how you're going to be able to help. And to those allies who want to come here and help, please remember to uplift the voices of the Native people that you're working with, and step aside and let them do the work so that you can help in other ways. Providing a facility. Sometimes they may need to be funded. Providing water, things. In the Indian way, you always bring something. Whatever it is, whatever it takes. Those are little things that mean a lot. And also talk with the local tribal officials. I want to thank Marty, who's in the back too, Marty Marr. He's pretty cool. He's actually a Mohawk. He's from the Confederacy, and he's a brother. He really is. And so, coming into our community and helping us. And then also Sam, also outside of the community, coming here and being a part, 2 different tribal nations. I just want to say that's a part of who we are. And so I'd like to leave these next few minutes if you have any questions or comments, and to kindly and graciously also thank these women. And remembering the movement didn't just start. It started, officially, legally in 1977, but we're continuing, here we are. So let's see how, yeah.
Before we have our question and answer, we'd like to do one more thing. So we're going to have a couple that's going to come up here. Because this topic was hard for some, and because some were in recovery over things that occurred, we're going to just do a tobacco offering to the 4 directors. So our offering is going to be to the north. East. South. Okay, to the south. Just checking to see if she's still awake. So before we do the question and answer, you can have a seat now. Before we do the question and answer, I'd just like to say that we're gonna have some smudge available just right outside the front door out there. There's a table set up. For some of you that have had issues in the past and are healing and so forth, we have smudging, and I'll be carrying my Eagle fan out there. I was gifted this several years ago by a tribe I worked for in Oregon, and I kept putting buckskin on this, and it kept falling off, and I thought, what the heck, am I not doing this right? And then I had a dream. The Creator told me to have direct contact with the Creator. You know, it's in the Christianity too, upon eagle's wings in Isaiah. It's very much a part of the culture. And I was told by the Creator, don't put anything on there. I want this to be healing, a direct healing from me. So I've been using this in many talking circles and AA groups, different things for the past 30, 40 years. You see that, I'm 70. Anyway, we're going to do that after the question and answers out there for those of you who need a little bit of touch of help. Even the law enforcement, there's hard work out there, and we thank you guys for doing that hard work for us. It's not easy out there, I know that. I know what you come up against. There's several things you come up against. But we'll have our question and answer now, then those that want to can join us outside. Thank you.
So,
Oh,
does anybody have any questions? I can microphone to you if you have any for our panelists.
I don't have questions, but I would like to share. This has been going on for years. My name is Zelda Penny. I'm a senior citizen for Community Group. And we started a group also for people that have been displaced and didn't grow up necessarily in here, for people that went to boarding schools and to foster homes and were adopted out into communities and around the countryside, because we have had our own issues that relate a lot to what these ladies have been talking about today. And so we meet on Thursdays. It's so far it's been women the meetings, that it doesn't mean that it's isolated to just women. But we just meet out at behavioral health on Thursday evenings at 5. Right? At 5. So I think that would be something that would be a great thing to unite what we do with what these ladies are doing also.
Thank you, Bella.
So I've also looked into a lot of the information and research considering this missing women, missing Indigenous women. And some of the suggestions is that there should be a photo of every person in every house. So if one of those missing, that there's a photo or a man. How that happen? Okay.
At the meeting in May up at Coeur d'Alene, this will be part of the discussion on things that we can do for Indian country to walk forward with some of our issues that we do have. So that may be part of our discussion up there during this 3 days we're up there.
Oh, that just made me smile. Thank you. The next thing is to have a calling list for the community, that when somebody is missing, that there's a calling list so that you can get the word out quickly. I just wondered if that's something that's being worked on as well.
No, our MMIW movement or program, I should say, in Lapway is very new. All of these suggestions are great. We do have a tribal member who works down in Boise, and she's on the
She's on various committees. In fact, she is one great resource. Her name is Tyson, and she is, I got a lot of my information from her. And I'm hoping we can incorporate a lot of that within the tribe. But again, complacency, and we need to really work on that with our tribal department. And I'm not here to bash them, but I can see that we need a lot of work, and there can be things changed, lost for one. But we do depend on social media a lot. I have different groups that I belong to, and when somebody is missing, and I've actually utilized it myself for a niece and a cousin of mine. So when that goes out, it's like wildfire. And if it's within Northwest region, it definitely gets shared, and people are out there looking. Another gal did a presentation here a couple of years ago. I should know her name off the top of my head, but she does a lot of work within the Northwest region as well. And she actually hits the ground, and she goes out and she looks for them. And that's in the bigger cities and such. And I believe she's actually enrolled in Perce as well. So we do have people in the background doing that work. It's just getting our program, our tribal program, to get up to those standards. And yeah, great suggestion. Thank you.
And then the last one was when somebody was missing with that calling list, there's a family member, there's a family or people that will go into the home and wait with them. So anyway, I'd be happy to help with it.
Thank you.
And I
Appreciate
hope
that.
will happen.
All right. Thank you.
Well, there's one thing I didn't mention, and that is that Delta Airlines CEO, Ed Baston, is the one who pays for the 1-800 number for people that have been trafficking or trying to get out of that. And they set up a fund called Skywish Mileage Donation Program. And that's to help people who are trying to get out of a trafficking survivor. So there's money for them to be able to fly home or wherever they need to go to get away from that. So, and Delta Airlines is the only one that does that so far, but he paid several thousand millions, 1.5 million, toward that, helping the hotline exist.
Anyone else? Questions, comments?
That's a go. Oh boy, it was really very powerful and strong stories that you told. We're really appreciate for coming here and being here for us and teaching us. I'm curious if you have any comments about spirituality, its importance in healing and in role in these areas. If you might have something.
I do. I worked in 5 different states with several different tribes. I've worked as a police officer. I've worked as mental health. I've worked as alcohol and drug. I've worked for these several different tribes. And the thing that they're finding is when tribes go back to some of their cultural things that they did in the past, it helps. When I was in Washoe working for the Washoe Trauma Center, some elders had asked me to go to their elders meeting. I was kind of scared, because I was only in my 50s then, I think. But I went, and then they said, is there something we can do to help these children? They're getting into meth, they're getting into alcohol and drugs, they're taking all sorts of pills. What can we do to help them? What can us elders do to help them? And I told them, I said, do you have any cultural things that they can do that they did in the past but they don't do now? And they sat around and they thought, and they said, one thing we need is, we used to have a ceremony for girls when they became of age and hit their puberty. They said what they used to do is they would take like a teepee pole and run up this hill and see how far they could go up on that hill. And they said that hasn't been practiced in over 100 years. It was taken from us. So I said, well, okay, let's put that together then. Let's have this ceremony. Do you have any girls that we could have there? Well, they had two girls that stood up and said they would do this. Two girls ran up that hill and they asked me to witness it. Being a non-tribal was impartial. But I went there, those two girls that did this, they had them run up that hill. Both those girls almost made it to the top of that hill, carrying a heavy like teepee pole all the way up. And man, everybody was so proud of them. They did round dances all night long for them before and after, and they had a dinner, and people would round dance, and they would take breaks and go eat. They had a table to serve people with. The elders all had that set up, and then people would come back and do the round dance again to help those girls in their journey. And that meant a lot to those two girls, that they had the support of their community. If we do things like that, there's other cultures that have things too. If you do those things and bring those things back, that helps. That helps our people. You don't so much for language, yeah, but then if you don't utilize your culture and tradition and have the spirit, then it's not going to work. You have to have it from here in your heart to be willing to help our people. And then you have to figure out how you want to help them and how you can help them and what you can do to help them. Not sit back and be an armchair person. Do it, and do it now. We need it. Our kids are dying left and right. We need to get in there and help them. Thank you.
Another part of that is that we have a variety that started up maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And I've noticed with these young women that started this group up, there's a lot of spirituality within the different things that they're doing. And our Native people are just, we're spiritual. You know, of course, we got our Christians and so on and so forth out there, but a lot of the rest of us, we pray every day. We pray medicine. We pray for strength. We pray for healing. I pray a lot for my people open their eyes and see what we have beneath them and to help with that. And I'm not a churchy person by far, but I believe in the Creator. I believe when I ask, He answers, whether it's something I wanted to hear or not. But I don't push religion on anybody. I don't do a church, but I do pray, and I believe that the Creator guides what I do. And I believe that a lot of our recovering people and a lot of people that are looking for strength out there, they return to the culture, whether it's what house, whether it's praying at home. But yes, it's definitely out there, and it gets through what we need to get through. Our community was getting hard last week. You know, we had 8 individuals, 18, in a car accident out here. 2 of them died at the scene, 2 of them there with, the other ones are breathing internal, mentally. You know, their hearts are broken. We've got parents out there trying to hold these kids together. We got school districts trying to hold these children together. You know, that's on top of everything else that we deal with. We've had so many losses these last 2 years. I myself last year lost 5 siblings, 5. And the year mark came up this last couple of weeks, and it hit me just as hard as it did the day that I heard they died. We carry a lot. So yes, as far as spirituality, yeah, it is definitely a part of what we do. Yes, yes. Yeah, you know, and the thing is with COVID, that really put a gap on us. But let me tell you, I'm in need, you know, I feel my strength sometimes, especially losing 5 siblings. Yeah, it was hard. And all 5 of those live along the coast with travel restrictions and everything else. It really messed me up mentally because I could not go home and do what I needed to do properly to say goodbye to my siblings. And I'm still hurting about that. And with everything kind of smoothing out and cross my fingers, I'll make it home here in a couple of months and be able to do what I need to do for myself. But with COVID, my gosh, it rocked our world. Native country across the states, it really took something out of us because as spiritual individuals and ones that believe in their culture, it put us in these predicaments where we could not do what we normally do. And that really hurts in the healing process. So So we had to turn to ourselves internally and figure out, how do I fix this for myself? Where do I get my strength back? And that was me just praying every single day, multiple times a day, to get me through. Because there were days where I could barely open my mouth, let alone think right. I was thinking five from the big country news because I was angry. That just me being honest with you, because I was hurting so bad. I was angry about it. And so that's when I had to reel myself back in and say, hey, this is not you. Get it together. And yeah, first thing I do is pray.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Harold, for asking that question. Does anybody else have one last question or comment?
I don't need the microphone, but I'd just like to echo what Harold said. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
I want to thank you ladies for sharing your story and also introduce myself really quick. My name is Jessica Ford. I used to actually work at the TV program for the tribe, you can see. I worked there for about 2.5 years, so I've heard a lot of stories and seen a lot of things. I experienced a lot of secondary trauma too. That's why I left my position there at UKMT, but now I work at Youth Health, the community health department. But a couple things I wanted to share while I was still working at the UKMT program is, I don't know if anybody noticed, we had a bulletin board between here and Lapway with our young girls, the NYW board. But we had a lot of our young girls from our community that were on this board, and we had to have a discussion with them about what MMIW is, or MMIP, and how they are targets just simply by being Native American women, and conversations about being aware of your surroundings at all times. Just conversations we had to have with our young girls that day when we were out at Community Sweat and we were taking these photos for that billboard. I have 3 sons and I have 1 daughter, and she had a lot of questions too. And at the time she was only 9, and she had questions about, so like when kids go missing, we get the Amber alerts on our cell phones. How come it's always white kids? It's never Native American kids. They mentioned the Gabby case and how that got national coverage. My daughter had questions about that too. What about these women that are missing and murdered that are Native American? How come they don't make the news? That also brings up things like residential schools, boarding schools. I don't know if you guys know much, but we have over 9,000 kids. 9,000 kids' bodies that they found. It's not on national news. And this is stuff we have to deal with being Native American. We have to explain to our kids, and how even when our kids are young, they feel invisible, I guess. One of the things that I did when I worked in the CCC program, I did a lot of education and outreach. We had an MMIW walk out there in last week. Since I've left the tribe and I work at Unico Health, I still do education and outreach. So I do want to offer, if you guys have any kind of events, any kind of coordination that you need, I'm a good contact. I'm running. I have lots of energy. I have lots of energy when it comes to being an advocate for a lot of things. So I just want to offer that to you guys.
Thank you for the question. Will the tribe be doing the MMIP walk again this year?
I think they're coordinating it. So
Carrie Picard used to be my old boss. She runs the UKMT program for the tribe. And she did talk to me last week because she asked me if I was coordinating anything on my side at the clinic. And I'm not, because we've been pretty busy, like she mentioned, with the 2 youth that we lost, and it's been really hard for the community. But I think they are planning something. I think UKMT is going to try to plan some kind of walk or something like that. I know last year one of the things that we wanted to do or we thought about was, there's a couple of documentaries that are really good about missing and murdered, and we wanted to set up, we have this TV screen that we can blow up and we put it in Lapway Park. We used to do movie nights, Thursday nights. So one of the things that we wanted to do, but COVID stopped us from doing, is having these documentaries being played as one of the activities for MMIWP. But I think it's in the works, but I'm not too positive. But even if it's in the works, I'll probably be there helping.
Thank you.
we're about wrapping up time-wise, and I thank you all very much for coming and for staying, not bolting at 12 noon sharp. I just want to echo what Harold said, that I just want to acknowledge all of the presenters, both Lucy and Paulette and Renee, as well as Chana and Michael. All of you guys are teachers to me and to the rest of us, and specifically from the faculty and students, part of the community, learning community here at Lewis Clark State College. We really appreciate you taking this leadership role in bringing these issues to to our attention, to the public's attention. And even though I'm retiring in the next month after 30 years here at LCSC, I hope that this relationship can continue, not just between the Nez Perce tribe and Lewis Clark State College, but specifically between people in this campus community, faculty and students who take these issues seriously and who want to learn more and want to figure out ways that we can be more effective allies and community members for you, rather than just Lewiston being kind of a black hole as far as understanding or being able to engage these issues. So thank you all again very much. And I'd also just like to say that an interesting thing that I've noticed is that a lot of the people that I've gotten to know the best, including today's presenters, first made connection with through environmental activism. And I'd like to just acknowledge you guys as leaders in the Indigenous environmental activism protection. In 2019, Lucy, Paulette, Renee worked with LCSC and myself to put together a panel titled Nez Perce Women Defending Mother Earth that was on the same day 3 years ago, to coincide with Earth Day as well. So, it's an important sort of two sides of one coin, protecting children, protecting women against both community violence and public violence, and then defending native ecosystems, the rest of creation, I guess would be a good way to put it.
Thank you, Chris. I guess with that, we'll conclude our panel today, and hope you all get to go out and celebrate Mother Earth too. Have a good afternoon.